Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Tanner Drake, Solutions Engineer at VMWare, and Dalton Fite, Technical Sales Intern at Trane. The topic of today's episode is called Building the Next Generation of PreSales. Tanner and Dalton are both university ambassadors of the National Society of Sales Engineers. Have you ever heard of NSSE? Well, this group is focused on raising awareness of sales engineering and pre-sales at the college level. So many times, so many of us stumble into pre-sales after we've already been working for multiple years. But the NSSE is focused on making college students aware of this profession, putting on a conference that simulates a technical sale. We're going to talk about how NSSE has changed Tanner and Dalton's lives, and really how you can actually help facilitate conversations with your university to raise awareness to pre-sales. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the future of the pre-sales role. Enjoy. This week's episode is sponsored by Vivint, the world's first platform designed to transform your pre-sales team into your company's most strategic asset. For more, visit vivun.com. Tanner and Dalton, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. Great to have you. How's it going today?
Going great, James. They're very excited to be here. It's 2021 for sure.
It's crazy that it's 2021. I don't know about you guys. I'm still having trouble getting over it, but I'm glad the year's here. Tanner, how are things with you?
Can't complain. Just coming back from the holidays, so well rested, and soon to be going to be finding out where my permanent role is going to be after training. So exciting time.
Are you excited? Are you nervous? Like, how you feeling?
I didn't really think about it until yesterday when somebody mentioned the potential of where we might be. And now I'm pretty antsy about it. I'm ready to go and find out.
Yeah. When do you find out specifically?
Maybe in the next week here. We'll see.
Well, I'm glad you guys had a good holiday, good break, and you're nice and recharged for the year. Today's episode is building the next generation of pre-sales. This one is a very interesting one because we're taking a little bit of a step back and we're talking about the pre-sales role from an awareness perspective, whether that is at the high school level, the college level, but the pre-professional level. So you guys have done some really great work with NSSE, National Society of Sales Engineers. Tanner, why don't you tell us how you got into pre-sales?
This is one of my favorite parts about the PreSales Collective is doing these virtual coffees. Everybody has that origin story of how they found pre-sales. There's no pre-sales major and everybody finds it their own way. But my story is a little bit different. I was in university going into my second year. And as anybody in university knows, you have to join some kind of academic club. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I defaulted to mechanical engineering because it was the generic engineering. And then I stumbled upon this club at UCF called the Society of Sales Engineers. You might be thinking that a Society of Sales Engineers, and it's not a common thing. UCF just happened to be one of the few universities that had it. And I joined the club, met the people in it, and absolutely fell in love with the role. That led down the path of pursuing it in school and getting an internship in kind of a sales engineering role in the construction industry. And then towards the end of graduation, landed a job at VMware in their new graduate training program for solutions engineering. So a little bit unconventional compared to most people on the PreSales Collective, but that's how I found the role.
I love that. And I'm going to dig into that in a minute. So appreciate you telling us the story. Dalton, tell us your story about how you got into pre-sales.
I think the one thing that I will say about both me and Tanner's story is we both stumbled into it, just like we like to say a PreSales Collective, but we stumbled into it a little bit earlier than most do. So I actually went into school with the same type of mindset that Tanner did, was going for a mechanical engineering degree, wanted it to just be as general as possible, not really shut any opportunities off. And I got a co-op with a company up in Ohio. And basically I took time off of school to go and work in the professional field. And that first rotation of a co-op, I got into a traditional engineering role. And I hated it. I couldn't sit at a desk all day. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like, this is not for me. And I went up and I went to my manager. I was open. I was transparent. I was like, I can't do this. I got to find something else. And he was like, that's great. We have plenty of other things to do. Sounds like you would be good at sales. And I was like, oh, interesting. I want to learn more. And that was kind of what I ended up going into it, was just like that manager that looked at me and said, look, he's the type of person that can go into sales engineering and be successful. And he already knows that he doesn't want to go deeper into the engineering side. And then from there, I had a great experience with that company working with the sales engineering. And then at the end of that rotation, they asked me through their involvement with NSSE and some of the other university clubs if I would be willing to start a society of sales engineers at NC State. So that was kind of my journey into this role and how I kind of ran into NSSE.
Both journeys are amazing because we joke about stumbling, but you guys still stumbled. You stumbled in the pre-sales role just a bit earlier, but I think that's what's so exciting is that you stumbled into it in college and were made aware of the role while you were attending university before you got into the pre-sales world. Because so many people that are probably listening to this podcast think about all the transitions that they had to make to get into this type of role, the experience that they had to get in adjacent roles or very similar roles. So it is great for our profession to know that there are people like yourselves getting in early. You know, you get 10 years in this role. It's going to be unbelievable, right? The things that you'll know and be able to accomplish that took people 20 years of experience before they got that is going to be pretty incredible. So I want to talk about National Society of Sales Engineers and everything that you guys are doing, because I think we need to bring more awareness to this, right? So Tanner, why don't you tell us a little bit more about NSSE?
And yet again, I'll go to the origin story part of it. Like with that sales engineering club at UCF, there were two other sales engineering clubs, one of those being at Iowa State and the other one being at California Polytechnic. And these three independent clubs came together and said, well, let's have a competition for this thing because sales is almost a performance-based role. And they came together and had a national sales engineering competition where they role played out a technical sale from start to finish. And it was this great experience for all the universities involved. And they said, hey, we've got a good thing going here. Maybe we should start a national society to organize all these activities and organize the growth of this community, because we're the only three sales engineering clubs out there. And there's no reason why there shouldn't be one of these at every university. So those three clubs came together and formed the National Society of Sales Engineers. And it's all about creating a community of problem solvers to face tomorrow's toughest challenges.
Tanner, that was awesome. I love that. So Dalton, how are you guys actually accomplishing that goal?
I think a lot of it is through just providing awareness and advocacy on university campuses. It's something that kind of gets glossed over in the technical aspect. There's not a lot of career services and stuff at universities that are talking about the sales engineering and pre-sales role. So we do a lot of work on getting to the students, getting to the front lines, provoking interest, getting people excited about the role to then begin to create these communities on campus. And then once we have the communities created, we want to help develop them. We want to connect them together. We want them to show that they're not alone for feeling like, oh, why am I not wanting to go code or go do hard design engineering work? Why do I feel like I'm an outsider? We want to connect them with people that also are thinking like that, thinking of the business solutions and trying to help the customers. So we do a lot of work as far as just community engagement with them right now, obviously virtually, but the National Sales Engineering Conference is probably the biggest thing that we do, where we provide them that actual experience to go and do it in person and carry out a technical sale before getting into it.
And we've seen a lot of growth so far because we originally started with those three clubs, and then Dalton came on board, like he talked about in his story of how he found the role at NC State. And then at this point, only about a year later, after starting this process of creating new clubs at universities, we've gone from that 4 clubs to about 10 or 11. So it's growing quick, and we're trying to do whatever we can to get a foot in the door at all these universities and figure out how we can get one of these clubs at every single college around the US and then hopefully in the future, other countries.
I'm going to dig you guys on this because there's a ton of people listening that went to university. They're like, I would love to make pre-sales part of my university. So Tanner, talk to me about the conversation. How do you approach a university and say, hey, we want to start this club? Like, is it to students? Is it to administrators? And what is their reaction when you're like pre-sales? Like, what the heck is that? Or sales engineering? What is that?
That's a perfect question. And it's something that, to be honest, is still up in the air as far as the best way to approach it. So we started with the low-hanging fruit because there's some universities that have very small programs dedicated to this field. University of Florida has a sales engineering minor. Iowa State has a sales engineering minor. And there are only a couple other schools that have those types of programs. So we started with those and approached the faculty at those schools and figured out a way to get in contact with the right people, to meet the right students, to create that base. And then other schools, it's been challenging. We've taken the route of starting with the faculty, where they do give that reaction that you mentioned of pre-sales, sales engineering, and then they kind of dismiss it because a lot of these university faculty members are all about the hardcore engineering, and maybe they're not aware of what pre-sales is and maybe look down on the profession. And then we went the route of students, and that's been where we've seen the most success, of finding these students that have been introduced to this role through a co-op or an internship, and then have those individual students lead the charge of creating these organizations at their respective universities.
That's really cool. So let me ask you, Dalton. So for the people that are listening that either have family members, have kids, or are connected to their local universities, what's the call to action to them? If they're like, wow, this sounds really cool, I want to bring this up to my university. Should they reach out to you guys? Should they reach out to the faculty? Like, what's the move? I want to give people a call to action, because some people are going to listen to this and be like, I want this.
And that was one of the reasons why I was really excited to get onto the PreSales Collective podcast, because I knew this was going to be a perfect place, because everybody's excited about this role. And then you hear about it and you're like, wait a second, people are doing this on a university level. Like, I want this at my university. I got the alma mater pride. Really, the best way is me and Tanner are university ambassadors for NSSE. So we're happy to sit down with any professionals or anybody that's interested in the role and finding out how we can get this started. But back to what Tanner said, you can get faculty buy-in, you can get a professional buy-in, but you got to get a student that's willing to be motivated and take that charge, which is why companies that have the internships and co-op programs that kind of focused around sales engineering are the perfect place to find candidates to start these clubs, because not only are they already excited about their role, but they know what the role is, they're on university campus and can get other people excited. And they have that experience of working in it as a young professional to be able to tell somebody about it. Like, this is what you're getting into. So it's how I found the role. It's how we've started so many clubs across the country, by going and talking to these co-ops and internship programs and getting people excited about it so that they go back to their campus and they're like, I can't hold this in. Like, I can't just be the only one that knows about it.
I'm throwing a call to action out there. So anyone listening who wants to get involved, we have a pre-sales incubator channel within the PreSales Collective Slack. I know that the NSSE team is pretty active in there. So if you have some questions, have some interest, want to talk to Tanner or Dalton, go ahead and check that out. Tanner, I want to ask you, why are you involved in this? Why do you do this?
It all goes back to remembering how I felt as that university student who had no idea what they wanted to do. And I knew my personal skill set wasn't suited to a hardcore engineering role, because before settling on engineering, at one point I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because the idea of articulating ideas sounded fun. And then at one point I wanted to major in something business related, until my mom convinced me that, well, engineers make more money. So finding this role that tied together the technical, the business, and the communication side of problem solving excited me so much that thinking about those other students that are sitting there that don't know about this role, that need some way to find out about it, it just made me want to take action and be involved with NSSE so that we can have that footprint everywhere where those students exist.
I love that. I think generally sales gets a bad rap. I even know in my career, I was like, I'm not going in sales. Why would I want to be a salesperson? And when you go to university, you don't think, hey, I'm going to go to university to become a salesperson. And then you try to talk about the sales engineer role. So not only are you trying to get engineers into a more salesy role, but you really want people who are people, they're focused on problem solving, that want to do something beyond sales. That's where this pre-sales role or sales engineer role comes into play, because I just don't think people know about it. Like you said, the salesy switch to engineering, like that's the camp I'm in personally. That's why I got into this role. So Dalton, why do you do this?
I think about that a lot, especially with the amount of work that we do with NSSE now. But really what it boils down to is just a strong passion about the role and kind of a unselfishness. When I got done with that co-op and I found out what this role was, and I got back to university campus, I just knew that I couldn't go back and just be fine knowing that I knew exactly what I wanted to do as soon as I got out of college and not tell anybody about it. Because I knew so many individuals on campus that would be great at it if they knew about it. They just might never get that opportunity to learn that there's a role. And so you kind of get this domino effect. I start talking to people about it. and people start getting excited and they want to get a group together. They want to start working. They want to meet companies. And that was what being a part of NSSE was so great, is just getting in there, being excited, enabling the community to be successful, and then going on LinkedIn after you've put in like 6 months work with the club and just seeing all these kids get pre-sales roles. And like definitely after the National Sales Engineering Conference, it's always buzzing about kids getting jobs with the people that get involved with us, and just like people calling out and being like, this changed my life, like all this stuff. That happened like mass scales at National Sales Engineering Conference, but then it also happens just from little conversations of like, hey, what is sales engineering? And then my mastered 30-second pitch, they're like, wow, that's what I want to get into. Like, that's amazing. That's what I want to do. So that's why I'm all about this role and being involved with NSSE.
I think what you guys do with NSSE is incredible. And what you just mentioned, Dalton and Tanner, I'm sure you feel the same way. The messages you get after, they're like, hey, this is impactful. This is amazing. When I spoke at the conference, I got so many messages from people who are like, I've been thinking about pre-sales, but I'm fired up now. Like, this is what I want to do. And I literally screenshotted all of them. And I was like, this is what this is all about. Dalton, I want you to expand just briefly on the conference, because you guys typically have an in-person conference, just switched to a virtual conference this year. So tell us a little bit about the conference.
Yeah, so the National Sales Engineering Conference, or NSEC, like we like to call it, it's something that we put on 2 years in a row now that it's been an official conference, but it's kind of become NSSE's staple and what people are starting to really know us by. What it is it provides an opportunity for students that either have had interactions with this role in the past or no experience at all, come in, actually work on a team to conduct a technical sales role play. And you have a series of 3 meetings. There's stakeholders, they get a case study. And so that's one aspect of this conference, is just kind of carrying out a technical sale and seeing if you even like it. Like, do you like doing discovery? Do you like asking powerful questions? And then another aspect is just professional development and getting them into workshops with pre-sales leaders and people from the industry so that they can develop those skills to be successful in the role play.
And in that conference, one of the coolest things is that the people that are acting as the customer for that role play, these are volunteers and judges that are actual pre-sales professionals. And they're giving these students feedback on what they've seen in the industry and how these students can get better. And it really helps them work on their skills and align themselves to what kind of a sales engineering role they might want to take on later on.
I love that. And thanks for breaking that down for us, because I know that with PreSales Collective, we talked to you guys earlier and you're like, hey, we need some volunteers. Can you help us out? And a lot of people from the community raised their hand to give back. I was actually surprised at how many. I was actually very happy about that. But a lot of people raised their hand and were judges, right?
Yeah. So thank you to anybody that partook in that conference this past October. And another thing I'll say about that is me and Tanner were kind of on the facilitating side. So we would hop from role play to role play to start recordings and get everybody geared up. But hearing just feedback from volunteer judges and volunteer mentors and stuff that they either learned from these kids or how they were impacted was just amazing. Because I know there was a handful of times where I'd hop in and I'd talk to a judge for 2 to 3 minutes and they'd be like, I was just watching a role play and these kids were killing it. And then they did like one little thing that was just a little bit off. And then I realized that I do these in my customer meetings. So now I know not to do that because this comes off a little bit on the wrong way. So it was just awesome to see, like, even the people that were volunteering to take their time to give back to the community were getting things out of it to kind of also better themselves and better their careers.
The future is bright. I really do believe that. Tanner, can you tell me how this group has impacted your life and your professional career?
It's been huge. First off, I wouldn't have the job that I have now if it wasn't for NSSE. So that's a big positive right there. And being in that club originally prepared me for what the role has to offer and made sure that I was set up for success. And then moving forward, Dalton mentioned that it's the selfless parts that keep us participating in NSSE, but there is a little bit of a selfish part of we make great connections and it'll help our careers personally for whatever challenges we might want to pursue. It really opens a lot of doors as far as what we may want to do.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So Dalton, I'm going to ask you a very specific question, because Tanner's journey, your journey, you went through NSSE, you went through the conference, you went through programs and got hired into professional settings. Why should somebody hire somebody straight out of college and someone who just has just light pre-sales experience?
That's a fantastic question. And I think the biggest thing for me, you get to take this person and I'm going to use the term green. They're very new. They're very fresh to the role. They haven't been in the industry for a while. And some people are going to look at that as kind of a con. Like, that's not great. We want them to have industry experience. But I would like to challenge and flip that. They're going to bring a completely different perspective to your sales team. They're going to sit there and be like, why do we do it that way? And they're going to be willing to ask and challenge you to think. And if you can say that is why we're doing it this way, because this, and this, great. But they're going to push you to think a little bit differently because they don't have all of those ingrained standards that they would have gotten if they had so much industry experience. Just that diversity of thought, just bringing something different and a fresh perspective to the team. I've heard it multiple times. That's why people like to bring interns in, because they'll look at problems they're having just completely differently because they just went through school, which is different than the school that people went through 5 years before them and 10 years before them. So they're learning different things and they problem solve differently.
I think one of my favorite things about working at Salesforce right now is that they embrace the beginner's mindset. I'm always a fan of challenging status quo and asking a little bit why, and not just to start trouble, but so to say, to make us understand that we're doing things the right way and not just because this is how we've always done them, because that's not evolution. So I love that you guys talked about that in that fresh perspective. Tanner, would you add anything to Dalton's response?
Yeah. These new graduate programs, they sound like a risky idea, but the companies that have done it so far have had tremendous success. Talking to people at VMware, the academy, they call it, is their new graduate training program. The people that come out of it, they say are top performers. They do the job well. The retention rate of these students that came from universities is tremendous. I think all but maybe one or two people that have ever gone through VMware's program don't still work for VMware, which is insane. And talking to other people at other companies like Steve Bullington from Salesforce, he said that their Scout program, he said that they've had a lot of success and that almost everybody that's gone through that program still works for Salesforce. So the proof is in the pudding that these programs work.
So I will tell you that I actually managed somebody from Steve's program, and what they have learned coming into the profession is quite impressive, especially from like a platform technology perspective. It's interesting, right? Because you're actually teaching people what it's like to actually work in the workplace and professionalism versus trying to teach them product and solution. And it's an interesting spectrum. So Tanner, tell us about your experience in the program that you're in now. I know it's specific to your organization. What have you learned that have prepared you for this placement that you have coming up?
Well, the biggest part of the learning curve for me has been technology. As somebody that doesn't come from a computing background degree-wise, I mean, I like computers and build computers, but that's way short of what it takes to be a solutions engineer at VMware. That's been a learning curve. And not being that person that pivots from a technical role is difficult. But what NSSE and UCF SSE did to help prepare me for the sales side of the solutions engineering role, it's been a good fit. And it's exactly what I expected the role would be. So I'm very happy with how it's going so far.
Actually, we had a podcast recently on how to get hired at a PreSales Collective hiring event. And Joel Duffield made the transition from IT. And so he was the professional who moved into pre-sales, but he called it experience without experience. And it sounds like that's what NSSE and these student clubs are doing, is preparing you to have the lingo, to understand the role, and have knowledge that when you walk into that interview, although you've never done the role, you've listened to podcasts, you've watched webinars, you've read blogs. And so you have a baseline knowledge that actually prepares you for the role more than you would probably expect that it does. So I like that you provided that perspective. I have a specific question for you, and Dalton would like you to take a stab at this first. We talk about the role of sales engineer. And the reason with PreSales Collective, we went pre-sales, right? Because we think that there's more than just sales engineers, solutions consultants, value engineers, solutions architects, the list goes on. But there's a lot of questions around technology sales engineers and field sales engineers, and those being a little bit different. So are they different? And is there a distinct difference between this sales engineer from a field sales non-technical company to a technology company?
We laugh about it because this is a conversation that we have a lot at NSSE. It's a conversation that I absolutely love and adore because at such a young age, I've been able to not only find out what this role is, but understand how it's different in different industries to know which one I want to go into. And so that's something that I want to emphasize to my club members and stuff like that. It's like, hey, these are a little bit different roles depending on where you go. And so you got to kind of know that to know what would be the best fit for you. And so what I would say is the biggest difference between the tech space, technology company, pre-sales role to kind of that field engineer on the industrial side is the AE-SE relationship. A lot of companies that have field sales engineers do not have AEs. So they are the qualifiers and the sales engineers. They carry it through the entire sales cycle. Whereas in the tech space, you kind of have to manage that relationship where those are both happening. Now, I don't think that is cookie cut how it happens everywhere, but from our experience with the companies that we get involved with, that's what we see. I don't know if Tanner, you have anything else to add there, but that is why I've really enjoyed getting to know and be a part of NSSE is because I see both sides of it. And now I can know where I want to go prior to even getting out of college.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And even when I was doing my brief stint in the construction industry a year before graduating, their SE roles they call territory managers because it's very heavy on the post-sales and fulfillment side of things of once they've worked out this technical solution, the SE works with them to work on details of how they're going to put together a construction project. So it's very much a post-sales role too in the construction industry.
Let's wrap on talking about the future. So before we even started the podcast, we talked for like 20 minutes about this a bit. So I want to get your guys' perspective on the future of pre-sales generally or sales engineering, because I think people are interested to get your perspective because you guys are on the ground earlier stage than most people. So Tanner, start us off. Super broad question. What is the future of pre-sales and sales engineering to you?
I could go off on a tangent for a long time about this one, but I'll try to keep it brief. I've been reading the book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, and super interesting, albeit a little bit dry, but it talks about how we're in an era where so much technology is automating away jobs in the world, and the technology implementation is becoming even more complex. So while many jobs are being automated away, the role of the solutions engineer, sales engineer, pre-sales professional, it's not going anywhere because there has to be somebody that speaks the language of technology for what a business wants to achieve. Because the biggest difference between the way things used to be, where technology was a tool to help a business, is that now technology is the business. And sales engineers are at the forefront of making that happen.
That is a great perspective. And so Dalton, I'm going to ask you the same question.
I'm going to look at it from more of kind of like a logistical standpoint because Tanner took the big broad stroke at it. So I'm going to kind of get down to some of the details.
Very complimentary of you.
I would say sometimes I think about it. Me and Tanner have a very interesting AE-SE relationship we've talked about. It's fun to work with him, but I would think looking at the future and looking at what's happening from the front lines as a college student and being a part of these organizations, I can see that people are starting to get more open to this idea of having young sales engineers and bringing in these new college grads and having organizations out there like NSSE that are working to get this awareness out at universities. And then also having immediate organizations that they can get connected to, like the PreSales Collective, is only going to make that getting experience without experience feed into these programs even better. So that when they get out of those academies and those programs, they're going to be able to hit the ground running and they're going to impact people's businesses immediately, because these are skills that students coming through the conference and being a part of the PreSales Collective, getting to talk to professionals through using the Slack coffee chats and stuff like that, they're going to have so much knowledge of just what this role entails to be able to walk into their first discovery call and know what they need to do, know how to ask those questions right. And that's why it's so fun to be a part of it at the college level, because everybody is so excited and ready to go and get out there. And I think with all these organizations working together, we're going to make it so easy and such a great glide path for them to do it.
There it is. I agree. I mean, the future is bright. You guys know my perspective is that this role is just going to continue to be more and more important as technology continues to become more and more prevalent. And the AE role is really changing depending on the complexity of the organization. This has been great. I've really enjoyed this episode, guys. I'm super appreciative of what you guys do with NSSE and glad to continue to work together. And so for those that are listening that want to get involved, want to volunteer, definitely reach out on the PreSales Incubator channel. I do want to ask each of you one last question because I want your advice. I want your advice for people who want to break into pre-sales, who want to make this career transition. So I know this is a broad question, but if you could sum it up, what's one actionable takeaway that we want someone to walk away from this episode with? Why don't you start us off, Tanner?
I thought about this earlier, but I'm drawing a blank now. Dalton, do you have something?
I'll take a swing at it. I think one actionable takeaway is just have the conversations about what this role is with people, whether that be people that are in the role, people that aren't in the role. Just get the perspectives of all the people around you. And that's going to create so much just excitement and support for what you want to do, especially if this is a role that you want to break into. Starting to go and look and have conversations, whether that be with managers or people around you, being able to talk about it and understand more so that you know exactly what it is the best way to get about it. And that's just that domino effect that I talked about. I talked to one person and I was like, hey, I want to start this club at NC State. And they were just like, let's do it. We were go-getters. It didn't take much. It was just kind of like, I was willing to talk about it with people. And then just all of a sudden there was people forming around me. And now we have this thing. That's what I think is really about it, is just being open to talk about it, even if you don't know everything about it.
I appreciate that. Tanner?
To add on to that, somebody told me once that people are always willing to help. And if you just reach out to that person that's in an industry that you're interested in, that's in one of these roles that you might want to go into, just reach out to them, have a one-on-one, pick their brain. You'd be surprised at how much guidance that can give you as far as what you want to do.
Great advice, guys. Thank you for making it very actionable. And I totally agree. The pre-sales community has been super collaborative and people are willing to help. So if you go in, reach out to somebody and ask questions, be curious and get a good understanding, I think that's the way to go. Tanner, Dalton, thank you both so much for your time. Keep up the great work. I love what you guys in NSSE are doing. It's fantastic. Looking forward to working with you closer throughout 2021 and onward.
Absolutely. This has been a great time.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Let's make it a good one. See you guys later. All right, PreSales Collective. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Love hearing from Dalton and Tanner and love what the National Society of Sales Engineers are doing for the pre-sales profession. I've been fortunate to get to know their team over the last couple of months and have been really working with them to start to build a pipeline of, hey, I'm interested in pre-sales in college. I go through NSSE and then I'm introduced to the companies that have these introduction programs and the PreSales Collective. A major theme that we are now focusing on is experience without the experience. And that's what NSSE does. That's what PreSales Collective is aiming to do, to really create this pipeline early on. As we mentioned, if you came into a pre-sales role right out of university, you could have 10 years of experience before most people even have 3, 4, 5 years. And that's really interesting to see what this will do to the long-term trajectory of our profession. So I absolutely encourage everyone who has some interest to reach out to Dalton and Tanner and Sam and the others with National Society of Sales Engineers in the PreSales Incubator channel to learn more. And then next year, they're going to have an event. They're going to have another conference, hopefully in person, potentially remote, where we will need judges. And so if you're looking to give back, that's going to be the perfect opportunity. All right, PreSales Collective, thanks for your time today. As always, like and share our podcast, and we'll see you next week.